Hi, welcome to the Lifestyle Miracles podcast with Marcus Dygert. I'm your host, Marcus, and today we have a wonderful guest with me, Brenda Dygert. I know you traveled a long way to be with me today. I wanted to get on and do a continuation of the Lifestyle Miracles and have Brenda on here so we could talk about in the early days of pressing in, going after God. It's easy for people to think that, well, you just have it so easy and you just see miracles after miracles after miracles, and we kind of skip over some of those hard times. And so I'm calling this episode Pressing In because we had to press in for a long time, didn't we? Yeah, and so, just to give you these thoughts about it, but some of those things about pressing in, and I know I'm not going to do a lot of scriptures throughout this whole thing, so we could just talk more, but some of the scriptures that really have held on to my life, especially is John 14:27, and it's where Jesus talks about, he gives us his peace. He tells us also that he doesn't give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. So that means you're going to have troubles. You're going to have fear in this world. But if we lean and grab a hold of Jesus, if we go after him with everything that we have and try to hold on to him and not hold on to fear and not hold on to the troubles, then we can make it through these things. And the whole purpose of these podcasts that I do and that Brenda's going to do with me and the other ones that we do is to help encourage you to hold on to Christ with everything that you are and to see the lifestyle miracles become something that's normal in your life and in your home, because it has become a normal thing in our home. Our kids believe and have seen miracles, and from crazy miracles of healing to pressing in for things like curly hair and getting it like Paige did, those type of things that we live this lifestyle that we're talking about. So I'm going to give you just a basics. If you have not watched the first episode of Lifestyle Miracles, my salvation story, dive into that. Go and grab a hold of that one because it'll give you the up to this point that I'm start talking about right now. I went all in with Christ in 1996 after almost dying in a wreck. And my druggy friends are the ones that pointed out to me that God was with me, that I must have angels or something. And that's when I went all in. And I saw God do miraculous things in my life, even with the felony charges I was against being dropped, to aligning me up with some friends that went to the youth group that I got saved in. And that they had a house, and I moved in with them. I rented out a room from them up closer to that church, and I got involved in the church. And actually, God opened up a door for me to get in ministry right away. Even though I had ran away from ministry for so long, God opened a door for me to go and start serving and ministering to singles, even though I was a young single. Yep. Not too sure that works out very well, but that's what God had me do. And so I started working in the singles ministry at a church, a pretty large church, but and just doing whatever God put in front of me and grabbing a hold. I remember in those early days that I didn't have much clue about what we think is normal now. Normal encounters in the spirits, or having falling out in the spirit. Those weren't normal things. Healings weren't normal things. I had the healing when I was in youth, and you were actually on that youth trip. Yep. We had dated kind of, Bible study dating and whatever you want to call it, because your mom didn't like me in those early days. And but then I went on that ski trip. You were on it. That I snapped my knee, but then was skiing the next day. Had a touch of healing. Knew God healed, but we weren't in a culture of healing, right? It wasn't normal. No, it wasn't something normal. So even that house and that home, when my friends and I were praying one time when my kidneys were really acting up, and I had a genetic kidney disease, and the doctors said my last kidney was failing and there's nothing they could do, that type of thing. And they're praying over me, just quoting scriptures, and I fell out. They thought I was dying. That's how much we knew in the early days. And so I got connected with one of my friends and a pastor friend of his that started a plant church in Helotes, Texas, and I just went to one of the services in a little hotel room, a comfort inn, that they released blessing the room and felt the call of God to serve there in that plant church and come in alignment there and went on staff eventually. And that kind of brings me up to where we're at, where Brenda steps into this whole journey. I was already in ministry, and we're running into some of the same friend groups from youth group, and people have mentioned Brenda to me or me to Brenda. And so we got each other's number somehow. I don't even remember how that happened.
Well, and I think it's important to note also that it's important to just be aware of what God's doing and where God's working. And so he was actively working and doing things to bring us back together. And I had been at a basketball game, and your roommate was there.
Oh, okay.
And I said, "Hey, have Marcus give me a call." Gave him my number. Yeah.
So she remembers the details better than me. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
And so I did, and I remember picking you up from the church. You're working at the church, a church, and I got done with our services. I drove pick you up. We're supposed to have lunch.
Just lunch.
And that was it. I was on drop her back off because I had evening services. That was back when Sunday nights were set aside for services, and churches did that. I wish we would do that again. But, instead of dropping you off, you came with me and went with me to the youth service that I was doing and part of. And we just kind of were together. And then at the end of the night, we had to close everything down and had to put the sanctuary back together. And I can't remember all the stuff I had to do duties wise, but we ended up going and having coffee, and during the dinner coffee, I think that's what it was. Yeah. But during that time, we got really quiet, and I remember thinking, like, this is the person I need to marry. And I'm like, wow, this is craziness, because just before this, 2 weeks before this, my senior pastor had said, Marcus, you need to do a 5-year plan. And I did a 5-year plan. At the very end of my 5 years was meet the woman that I'll get engaged to, that I'll get married to eventually. That was my plan. And God kind of laughed at that. And surprise. And I'm sitting there thinking about marriage, and I'm being all quiet, and you're being all quiet.
Yeah.
And you asked me what I was thinking. I was like, you don't want to know what I'm thinking. And I go, what are you thinking? And you said, I think we're supposed to get married.
Yeah.
And I said, that's what I'm thinking right there. And it was just a God moment. Now, we've been married almost 25 years. Not saying it was easy in the beginning, and I'm going to skip over a lot of that, but we went through premarital counseling and those type of things. But, in this story, I wanted you to know the beginnings of it and how Brenda got involved. But Brenda was there. Even the first time I preached, you were there and saw me and said, I am one hot guy, I think. Is that what you said? But no, she said that, told her friend that I was cute.
I did.
and so we just really, God intertwined our journeys even before this, and called us to be together. And we know that is, and I know for sure that the strength of Brenda has gotten me through so many things, and you're going to hear some of the stories, and there's so many more stories, but I just want to have a broad view of how this precedent worked, because it was a journey of 14 years that we're going to talk about here in a condensed time, but it was a journey of pressing in. We're in a very religious culture. We were in areas where elders will say, stop, shoving the Holy Spirit down my throat and just reading from Acts, to elders that didn't want to hear about salvation, and some churches as I pastored, to all kinds of craziness. So it wasn't always an easy journey. So what am I talking about? So we went from this lunch date to getting married a little over a year later, and went through a lot of the normal steps to make sure things were right, and get the pastor's blessing and kind of your mom's blessing, and that worked itself out later. But and just really just pressed in to what God was doing in our lives. So now we worked both full time at the time, and so I would work all day. And then there'll be duties I had at the church, and I'll go and clean the church, or go and mow the grass, or do leaves, or go do services. And then you sometimes be able to join me with the services, and sometimes you're too tired. And we were going nonstop for that first year of marriage. Mm-hmm. It was not easy, but I know that this was a God moment too, in our journey of understanding this lifestyle that we're called to. And this was so early on in that first year of marriage that this happened. I praise God for that, even though it was hard, because I remember, we had a little apartment loft thing, and I remember leaving. I was going to leave for the church, and I had got home from work, and you broke down crying, and you're like, we never see each other. We're never with each other. And I'm thinking that we're doing ministry together. We're with each other, right? But that's not the same.
No, it's not. And I think also during that time we had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And so just the busyness of our lives and the grieving process and not really having time to spend just processing together was making it really difficult.
Yeah. And so this is an important lesson I think we all should learn. And I want to highlight this one for just a second, is that ministry does not supersede your relationships.
Absolutely.
Okay, especially marriage. Your relationship with God, it has to be foremost the focus, and then you making sure you're good, and then your marriage, and then your children, and then ministry. If you want to put a priority list, I like to say God is in center of all of them, and put God in the center. But you have to say, you know what, I'm going to focus on God. I'm going to focus on making sure I'm right with God. I'm going to focus on my marriage with God, making sure that's right with God. I'm going to focus on my children, making sure that's right, and then comes ministry. A lot of times we flip it and put ministry first, and if we kept on doing that, I don't think we would have survived as a couple.
Right, absolutely. And I also think a lot of people equate their relationship with God with ministry, and that's two separate things.
Definitely.
Like you said, God should be the center of your marriage and your family life, but ministry can't replace God in those areas.
Yeah, definitely. And so we had to, we prayed through things and worked through things, talked with our senior pastor of the church, and I ended up resigning from the church, the pastor blessed it and said, yeah, y'all need to spend time together. And so we end up moving. There's several things that led up to this, but we ended up moving from San Antonio into Cuero. We had a crazy thing that happened between there, but it looked like a high blessing. But we lived in this mansion that we couldn't even afford to put furniture in. And then we moved several times during this season. I'm putting a broad stroke on this, but it was a lot of moving, but just being together, going through normal husband and wife stuff, and making decisions, and then renting a house, and then I'm saying, oh well, my job's another city, and then so we need to move closer, and then we moved kind of to the country, and living this little country life. But I had a city job, and working away, and I was doing well. We're close to your family, Brenda's grandparents and father, and it was really nice having that family environment.
Yeah, it was.
And getting that example of your grandparents, Grammy and Gramps as we call them, of their marriage, and how their marriage was strong. And he was a preacher in a Methodist church. He was a spiritual father to me. It was a good time of growing. And in the midst of that, though, we were getting, I think, a little complacent. A little comfortable where we were at, and thinking that this is what God's called us to. We attended church and did the normal churchy thing, but we also didn't really focus on ministry for that short year. It wasn't very long or so before this happened, but we were just kind of getting complacent, and I was even getting complacent in my work and not paying attention as I normally would do. Now, a side note of this is I'm going to talk about my back injury for a second, but this was not Satan. This was Marcus not paying attention to safety. I know that we like to blame Satan for everything. But sometimes I think that's not the case. It's not true. We can't blame Satan or God in some things. We need to look at our own selves and say, wait, I made the decisions. And so in this, I was working too fast at work, and I ended up hurting my back, and fell 14 feet and into a hall, in a Victorian style home, which is a narrow hall, and hurt my back really bad. Try to work through it, trying to be the macho guy thing.
Right.
And then my back blew out completely, and I fell off the ladder, and the homeowner had to rush me to the hospital. In the midst of this this injury, which was severe injury, that I blew out the disc in my back. It wasn't a herniated disc. It was completely blown out, fluid leaking onto the nerve, sciatic nerve damage. There's a lot to it. I focus more on what you were going through at the time, because we had another significant moment 2 weeks later.
Yep. So about 2 weeks after Marcus hurt his back, we found out we were expecting our daughter Paige, and it was very overwhelming. It was a shock. It wasn't like we were preventing it, but we didn't realize that we were already expecting when he hurt his back.
Yeah.
And so it just was a lot of information to process very quickly.
Yeah, so I mean, here your husband is in so much pain that the doctors were just medicating me. They're really more pill pusher doctors, pharmaceutical doctors. I was on medications that you had to carry copies of the prescription so you didn't get in trouble. I was pretty zoned out through a lot of this, and here you are trying to help me get dressed and help me get around and get to all these appointments
and working,
and then you're working and you're pregnant, and yeah, it was a little bit difficult.
It was busy.
Yeah, it was busy, and in the midst of this, we weren't focusing on what God had for us. We weren't focusing on healing or anything of that. It was just trying to survival mode.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was not working with my doctors.
Nope.
And the doctors were very strange and pill pushers. I mean, they did put me on the rack once, and I'm talking about medieval rack, and this is no joke. It's
like the Princess Bride.
Yeah, small town doctors, but they put me on this table, and they put a leather strap around my chest that had a chain and a leather strap around my waist. I don't remember this, but they had a chain, and they cranked it on both ends.
It is like the Princess Bride.
I was like, what in the world are you trying? And they're trying to stretch my spine. Seriously. And it was not working out. These doctors were not doing the right thing. And they were more practicing than trying to find a solution or looking at the MRIs correctly. They didn't read them right.
It took 6 years for
Yeah,
a doctor to identify.
But and this time we stayed there, and then we're like, okay, we have to do something different. So we're gonna move back to San Antonio, Texas, and we had hardly any money, and I think at that time you were just almost ready to
I was
to deliver.
6 months pregnant.
Yeah,
I think.
And with Paige, and so we ended up moving back to San Antonio, moved in with my foster family. That was the only place we could move into at the time, and so we moved in there, and in the middle of that, when I hurt my back, I was working when I hurt my back for the company, but then I got fired for not working, or I forgot what the excuse was.
I don't even remember.
They had some kind of crazy excuse, but they did it in a time frame where it ended my insurance.
Right
that was
before Paige
covering
was due.
the pregnancy. And so we had all these financial issues, medical issues, my medical issues, your pregnancy, living with family. And I just, think everything was just jumbled together for our lives at this point.
Yeah, really hard to even think about what we were supposed to do ministry-wise.
Yeah. And I remember, being in so much pain, I could barely walk. And I was sleeping, I think, and God woke me up, if I remember correctly, this first time. But and was like, you need to focus on your calling. And we were staying at your mom's, I think, at the time. But we need to focus on. And I remember feeling like God's like, you need to focus on your call. Stop running away from your call, and let me take care of you. Trust in me. And I told Brenda about it. I said, I think God's going to heal me, and the pain was different. It was changing, but I was like, I had to take a step, and I was like, I'm just going to stop taking medication and see what happens. And I don't know if you remember that.
That was a rough day or two after.
Yeah, I went from taking medications for almost 2 years to cold turkey. Don't cold turkey, people. Talk to your doctors. Yeah. I went through the sickness and the sweats and the shaking and everything else, and I was doing pretty decent. I had some pain here and there from the stuff, but it wasn't as bad. I don't know if it was full. It wasn't restoration, that's for sure. We didn't even know that God restored things at that time. We just didn't know anything, to be honest. And
we were happy for the reprieve.
Yeah, and then you had the baby, and Paige came, which is a beautiful moment, and we're still living there. And then reconnected with the church that I resigned from, and I went back on staff there, and we talked with them, and I went on staff, on pastoral staff there as an associate and youth pastor. Yep. We had a baby, and we just started living life with God in a plant church. Yep. We moved a couple places. God opened doors for us to live a couple places. But we moved. I remember we lived in this small town called Bernie early on, and Paige is a baby. She can't take the drives. She got so car sick. And the main road that got to the little town that right outside San Antonio that the church was very curvy. We had highways we could use, so we sometimes took the long route. But Paige would throw up on those roads, but we'll still go on those roads. And I'll drive back and forth, and it was a good 35-minute drive, somewhere in there. And still drive to the church. I was still working, doing contract work. I think I called it MSI, Mark's Supplement Income. And did roofing work. I did all kinds of different stuff. And
security systems.
Yep.
Satellite, TV satellite.
Yeah. And doing those things. And then I was even working with a company, and this was early on. This was in 2001. So Paige was about almost a year old. Mm-hmm. And I was on a job site and doing a security system install and a new home, new construction. And so wiring up the house. And the drill got caught and snapped my wrist.
I was pregnant with Hunter.
Yeah, you're pregnant with Hunter. Mm-hmm. So there, another time.
Yep.
And it's like we have these moments that are, wow. I mean, like, we're a family, we're doing ministry, and I'm doing the work I need to do to help take care of the family and whatnot. And then I have an injury. These things happen, right? And so how do we press into this? And I remember the my hands swelling up and everything swelling up through here. They went and did x-rays, and then they did an MRI, I think it was, that showed the torn ligaments all the way across here. And so they were like, you need to have surgery. And I was like, boy, this is just gravy, another situation I'm dealing with. And so they did a surgery. The doctor put, I think it was 6 pins originally to hold everything together, to help it try to fuse together back and the ligaments grow back together. I don't know all the medical terms of this. I do remember this one part. I had a cast on my arm, and we're shopping, and my arm was hurting really bad. And
with 2 kids at Target.
Yeah. And I pushed on a little area. I felt a pin came out through the cast. He talked about this lovely stuff my poor wife has to go through. And I tell her about it, and she's like, you need to call the doctor.
Yeah.
And so I called the doctor's office, and they talked to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, it's a failed surgery. And the nurse is like, just pull it out, or you come in and we'll do it. And I was like, what? And so I pulled that thing out.
At Target.
It was nasty looking. It was bloody, and it released the pain, but then it was a failed surgery. So they're like, well, let's see if we get strength in the wrist. And they removed the other pins. And try to get me strength. And there's a bunch of popping and grinding, and I couldn't really grip much in this wrist, and just pressing into God in this. And I remember God, we were singing a song at church. It was during youth ministry, and I was just in the back just singing, and it was about freedom. And I was like, God, set me free from this, and I don't know what clicked in me to ask him for that. But I felt like God said, you're free. I'm healing your wrist. And I declared it, even though I didn't know what it meant and how much, the pain was gone. But I declared it to the youth, and that God's healing my wrist. And God did. God completely restored my wrist. Yeah. And the next day, the next couple of days, I went to a physical therapy appointment. I remember this. He was a younger Catholic guy that didn't believe in anything I believed in. We had all these great conversations. And they had all kinds of machines. And I tell him that God just healed my wrist. He goes, God doesn't really do that anymore. And, he had his theologies on it. I was like, no, seriously, let's test it out. Because we can't do that. And he put me on this machine that simulates like a ladder climb. And so it has these little things you pull on. And he sets it the low setting to where I'm just like barely pulling, and he walks off and starts checking on other people. And so I just start cranking it and pulling and cranking it and pulling and cranking it and pulling. And he comes back, how you doing? I said, look, check it out. And he looks at it, what'd you do? And I go, look, watch. And I start pulling down, and he went to pull it and he couldn't move it. He put both hands on it to pull it down. I had it at that level. I don't know the numbers on the machine, what they exactly meant. I was just messing around. But God completely restored my wrist. And even in the middle of all that, we still had to press in. I mean, we're on a high, but then we have this church that we're overextending ourselves in, working very much too much. We didn't know how to say no.
No.
That was our issue. We were doing, whether it's children, nursery, youth, adults, Sunday schools, cleaning the church, sound engineer. We call it sound men back then. But doing the sound in the back, and I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And still trying to work because it was a small church and plant church, and so I got paid sometimes, and still working and trying to grow a family, and we're just burnt out, and it wasn't working. We're the youngest people in the church, and the only ones with kids, I think. There's just a few that would come here and there. And God really just opened up the doors for our minds to say we need to stop doing. We need to understand where our lanes are, what we need to be doing ministry-wise, and not just do everything. And we had the hard talk. Really love the pastors that we're under, and they were very close. And had to have a hard talk and saying that we really do need to step back from this. This is not good for our family. It's not good for our mental health. And we were just burned out. We weren't doing ministry anymore. We're just doing works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just really difficult. So we ended up resigning, and then what do we do now? God, where do we have us going? I hope you've been enjoying this conversation that Brenda and I have been having about our lives, about pressing into God, just time's sake, and breaking this down into several parts for you. We want to just give you a little bit of thing to think about before you watch the next one, but we want to say just pressing in is key no matter what you're going through. If you think about it, like Joseph's life, when he had the encounter with God that led his brothers to jealousy, that led to him being in a pit, to being in the desert, to being sold for slavery, and then being accused, and then in jail. If you read those scriptures in Genesis, it's 39 through 50, I believe. But if you read those scriptures there, you'll find that it keeps on saying, but God was with him. And God is with you in these moments, and we could look back at these, and sometimes you can't see it in the middle of the storm, right? And so God is with you in these moments. God has been with us in these moments, whether it's losing everything, or a business partner taking everything, or being in surgeries, to families saying you should get divorced, to just going by chance to just go and to a meeting and see what God does. We're pressing in and knowing that God is with us. And that's been key. That has been one of the biggest roots, that no matter what the world throws at us, we know that Jesus is the one that gives us peace, and he has good things for us, and he's our Lord and Savior. So we press into that. So I hope you enjoyed the series so far, and we'll watch the rest of them and listen to the rest of them if you're listening on the various things. But just keep on pressing in wherever you're at. Know God is with you. I pray that you're blessed, that you're highly favored, and that you get pressed into God. Let his mercy and grace and peace flow over you and everything that you do. But just know that God is with you. He's for you, and he'll see you through the storm. He told you to go, therefore you'll get to the other side.
That's right.
God bless you, and we thank you, and tune in again.